Hey everybody, Mike Hagen here. I want to spend a little bit of time clarifying the difference between automatic ISO settings in the Nikon camera. You know, in the last video I introduced automatic ISO and I explained that there are two fundamental settings in the Auto ISO system. The first one, automatic ISO shutter speed, is where you know that you need a specific speed to create some either action like motion blur or to prevent motion blur. You know, so you'll pick something like an 800th of a second or 1,000th of a second if you're shooting sports like football or soccer or tennis. On the other hand, you may choose a slower shutter speed, maybe a 30th of a second or maybe a 60th of a second if you're shooting like, let's say, a bicycle and you're panning along with the bicycle, or maybe a car at a sporting event, like a race car event, and you'll pan along. You know, the car will be sharp, but then the background will be nice and blurry. So again, automatic ISO shutter speed, that's where you'll pick the shutter speed based on your needs. The second option in automatic ISO is something called automatic ISO Auto. Now in this case, the camera picks the ISO for you, and it does it based on the lens's focal length. So like I explained in the last video, if you have a 50mm lens, the camera will pick a shutter speed of a 50th of a second or 1/50th of a second. If you have a zoom lens, then the camera will actually change the shutter speed based on what focal length you're zoomed at. So like this lens is a 24-70, the camera will vary the shutter speed between about a 25th of a second to a 75th or maybe an 80th of a second. Okay, so in the menu system, there are ways to further configure what's called the automatic ISO Auto setting. And if you go into the menu, and you go into the shooting menu, that's the one that looks like the little green camera menu, you scroll down to the section called ISO sensitivity settings. Go to the bottom setting there, and there's something called the minimum shutter speed. Go in there, and you'll find the menu item called Auto. So again, it's called Auto ISO, and then there's another submenu called Auto. Move to the right, go into that menu, and you'll see a submenu with 5 different tick marks. And each of these tick marks pertains to a different shutter speed. So you know the middle tick mark, that's where the camera will pick a shutter speed based on your focal length. So if you have a 50mm lens, it'll give you a 50th of a second shutter speed. But this is cool. If you move 1 tick to the right, it doubles your shutter speed. So for example, 50mm lens, the camera gives you a 100th of a second shutter speed. 2 ticks to the right, it goes to a 200th of a second shutter speed. So it quadruples your shutter speed. So basically the higher the resolution your camera is, say you're shooting something like with a 36 megapixel D800, you generally want to go with a slightly faster shutter speed. So when I set up my camera for Auto ISO Auto, I move it 1 tick to the right. That gives me a 100th of a second shutter speed when I'm using a 50mm lens. So there you have it. A little more distinction between the automatic ISO Auto setting versus the automatic ISO shutter speed setting. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.